to the content. But I know for me, sometimes I've been like, I'm kind of fatigued with this whole Zoom stuff. But what I did learn, just in case you're kind of like me in this mode, if you right click up at the top of your picture where those little dots are, you can hide self view. So I can't see what you're seeing. So if I have something on my face right now, I don't see it, and it makes it so much better of an experience over Zoom. So you're not staring at yourself. So as I said when I introduced myself, my name is Dan Balsky, and I'm the Director of Student Life at Arapahoe Community College. And just a little bit about my background and interests. I was somebody who went to higher education right out of high school, but I'm first generation. So I didn't know what the experience was supposed to be like beyond, I need to do this to get the job I want to get. And I learned so much more about myself through the process of being in college that I decided I wanted to work at a college. And so some of the things I've picked up along the way through learning, through formal and informal education, and through the realm of student life, a lot of what we do is helping people to function better, to be more successful, to learn different leadership skills, but to also learn things about ourselves that are important frameworks for our entire existence. So for example, the content of today is not just reserved for the academic environment or the career environment, but also for our lives and how we interact with others in the world around us. And so I have a lot of interest in these kind of concepts. And I'll be sharing some information with you all today. But what I'll say is, by nature of the workshop timing, we're not going to go super in depth in all elements of this, but there are great resources out there. If you want a deeper dive into some of this content, I highly encourage you to do that. But what I want you to do, at least to get us started off, is to think back on your experience in growing up, and what kind of messages do you feel were reinforced for you, and or you reinforced for yourself around concepts of intelligence, ability, or talent. So think about that. When you were going through school, what was your thought about those concepts, and specifically relating them to you in your experiences? If you are comfortable in doing so, you could certainly jot your thoughts in the chat. I encourage you all to use the chat throughout this particular workshop to share thoughts and reflections and comments as we're going along. But that whole notion of intelligence, ability, talent generally does stem from early facets of life and messages that we receive from our school systems. It could be from family, it could be from external sources outside of those environments, but we are given different concepts that we may latch onto. They could be helpful or not, as we will kind of peel back as we discuss the notion of different mindset. So just kind of read through this in chat. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And that's definitely going to feed into, thank you for those comments, it's definitely going to feed into some of these notions that we'll pick up on. What I'm going to have you all do, it'd be helpful if you have some kind of scrap paper or something near you, or if you don't, you can maybe jot these numbers down in a note on your phone. But we're going to do a quick 10 question survey on these next slides. So shoot one question at a time. So for example, this statement, your intelligence is something very basic about you that you can't change it very much. If you strongly agree, put down the number 0. If you strongly disagree, put down the number 3. So we're going to do that for each of these 10 statements. based on whether or not you agree or disagree. Just like any kind of assessment like this or personality assessment, not a right or wrong answer per se. Don't overthink it. Just kind of ride off of how you're feeling in the moment. No matter how much intelligence you have, you can always change it quite a bit. Only a few people will truly be good at sports. You have to be born with the ability. The harder you work at something, the better you will be. I often get angry when I get feedback about my performance. I appreciate when people give me feedback about my performance. Truly smart people do not need to try hard. You can always change how intelligent you are. You are a certain kind of person, and there is not much that can be done to really change that. An important reason why I do my schoolwork is that I enjoy learning new things. So really quickly scope that out if you were missing any of these or you needed to get a number down. Again, don't add stress components to this. There's no right or wrong answer. Hold on to those numbers. You'll want to add them up, but we'll get back to that later in the workshop. What I want to do now is to go over some pillars before we jump to what fixed and growth mindset are, because I think it's important to kind of set the tone. And as we're moving along, so yes, first of all, these pillars will be the framing for how we'll go about discussing these concepts that I consider to be important. I'll review both of those different mindsets and statements about them. We'll talk a little bit about some studies, where some of this information comes from, how we apply that information to our lives, and then certainly as time allows, give you all an opportunity to have some discussion. So for me, I do think it's important to consider certain framing pillars anytime I'm entering different notions of content. So for example, I do think it's important for us to consider our health and well-being, how we are able to receive information even now with what you're doing in this particular workshop. Our ability to receive information, to learn, can be impacted by how we treat our body. Our notions of health all operate on a different spectrum. What is healthy for my body may be different than somebody else's, based on what I'm going through and what I'm experiencing at any given moment or across an entire lifetime. But how we treat our biological machines that we are living in can impact this whole system and structure. And that's not to say, even I throw this out to other students in different workshops, that's not me saying like, don't ever have sugar. I ate a lemon Kit Kat right before this presentation. I try to think, can I be making healthy choices 9 times out of 10? Tends to be 8 or 9 times out of 10. I don't count them up, but that's what I try to keep in mind. I do think it's important to consider our history, our own individual history, family history, upbringing. So when I ask you about what messages were reinforced as you were going through education, that has an impact on us. Our upbringing has an impact on us. And so I think it's important to consider that, as well as entire complex cultural histories. Our identities, our backgrounds shape our experiences and can have an impact on how we receive certain information. So even the notions of stereotypes, for example, are typically fixed mindset labels, for example, very limiting labels. If you don't have a sense of how your identities shape your experiences, or the identities of others shape their experiences, that could be a barrier to you really embracing this information in the best way possible. So that knowledge of self is important, as well as the knowledge of our framework and how that affects us, how education systems are set up, how our identities operate in society, so that we understand the things that impact us externally. And then certainly context. So as an example of a context consideration, a lot of times I point out technology. If you grew up without things like social media, which I did not have through my education, I may have received less messaging and reinforcement going through 5th grade than students may now. There's a lot more influence, there's a lot more eyes and pressure and judgment and evaluation that folks may have going through education, not to say that we don't have that currently operating. Another context, for example, the pandemic is a context that we're all living through that changes and shapes our experiences. So these are all notions and pillars that I think are important to consider anytime I'm engaging in any kind of content, but especially when we're doing some content like this, where we are really diving into how the mind works and how that experience shapes us. A lot of this notion of mindset is going to be impacted by our internal voices. I saw a quote once that said, the voice we will hear the most in our lives is our own. And it's true, we go through the day having conversations in our head. You're having it right now as you're hearing me talk and delivering information to you. You had it earlier today as you were probably thinking about what you needed to do for yourself for the day, what was on the schedule. You'll have it tonight. It's a continual process that we go through. How we talk to ourselves and how we process our experiences wildly shapes our life experiences in good and bad ways, which absolutely fits into the notion of fixed and growth mindset. And so I think it's important to really consider your internal monologue and what kind of things you're saying. For example, as I'm moving through the day, if I have an experience or if a memory pops up, I may have this instinctive negative response at times, but then I may counter it or try to reframe it to not necessarily have that same thinking pattern. But certainly it depends on what it is, right? Like if I were to step on a nail, I wouldn't try to reframe that and say, like this wasn't such a bad experience. That's not something I would reframe. But if I had a typo in an email I sent to a colleague, how I talk about myself, if I'm trying to bully myself, that might be something that I would reframe and try to shape perspective. And that's a lot of what this notion of fixed versus growth mindset is going to be, is what kind of internal things are you saying to yourself as you are moving through your experiences on a day-to-day basis. And how you talk about yourself as you're moving through those experiences are going to really impact how you move forward successfully or not. So this overall notion of mindset comes from a psychologist named Carol Dweck. And what she was looking into was the notion of the power of our beliefs, both conscious and unconscious, and how changing them can have a profound impact on our lives. I will talk about some of the research that she did with school children and where some of this stems from, but it doesn't end with our experiences in school. That may have been where that started to come up for us and where it may have started to become reinforced, but it certainly shapes other facets of our lives as well. Walking into this particular workshop, you come into it with a heavy leaning, probably in one or the other area of mindset. If you're somebody, for example, as you pay attention to these descriptions, think about if this is something that connects to you. And what I will say that you need to keep in mind, and this is another perspective shaping situation, if you are somebody who leans towards fixed mindset, it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's nothing to shame yourself for. It's nothing you should be shamed by somebody else for being, but it is important to reflect on that and consider, is this how I want to continue to maintain how I operate internally? And as I would tell students in orientation sessions when I would cover this information, I can't get in your head to tell you to be one way over the other. But I do think it's important for you to be thinking internally about how you operate on a day-to-day basis. So fixed mindset assumes that our character, intelligence, and creative abilities are things we cannot change in meaningful ways. For somebody with a fixed mindset, success is affirmation of intelligence that you already have, and that's already set as a fixed standard for you. Striving for success and avoiding failure at all costs is important. That's a way of maintaining your smartness and your skills. Every situation for somebody who is in a fixed mindset is either a confirmation of their intelligence or it's proof of lack of intelligence. So for somebody who operates from a fixed mindset mentality, there's an urgency to prove yourself over and over again and to not put yourself in situations where any of your flaws may be addressed. So somebody who operates from a fixed mindset almost has like a really intense defensive response to criticism, where if they receive it, they become defensive and will try to counter that or to avoid it at all cost. Somebody who operates from this mentality will question whether or not they will succeed or fail before trying something. Will they look smart or dumb in trying something, accepted or rejected? There's a lot of evaluation and internal judgment that comes from operating from this framework. Somebody from a growth mindset looks at things from a different lens, where challenge and failure are not indicative of lack of intelligence, but they are a springboard for growth and learning, an opportunity to stretch beyond our current abilities. Abilities to somebody who operates from a growth mindset are things that somebody can cultivate through efforts, that though we may differ wildly in different ways and our performance may be different than somebody else's, everyone can change and grow through application and experience. The hand that we're dealt as a growth mindset individual is just a starting point for development. Our experiences create a passion for learning rather than hunger for approval. So those are some overarching notions of both of those mindsets. Here's a chart that will show you kind of a comparison feature between those different mindsets. So fixed mindset folks want to appear to be intelligent. Growth mindset folks want to grow and learn. Folks who come from fixed mindset may avoid challenges, whereas growth will embrace. Fixed mindset may give up easily, whereas growth may see efforts as paths to mastery to get better. Efforts are fruitless or worse for fixed mindset. Growth mindset individuals may persist in face of setbacks. We've kind of talked about feedback, how we evaluate others and their successes can be impacted by those mindsets. Are we threatened by the success of others, or are we inspired by the success of others? If you operate from a fixed mindset, you may plateau early and achieve less versus achieving higher levels of success. So in that deterministic view, is this just our fate? Is this just who we are? We're either born with it or not. Or do we have some ability to adjust our circumstances? So again, two very different ways to consider how we operate and view the world. And I don't think they're static, right? I think we can get in situations where we may feel one over the other. We may lean more heavily towards one, but then find ourselves in another situation. But you can probably evaluate situations you've been through and see where you may have certain mentality. And I like to tell you all, like, again, I would tell students in orientation, it doesn't matter how every other day before this day occurred and what you've experienced. It's part of your narrative, but what do you want to do to drive that narrative differently from this point forward? Like, every day is a new page in that book. So yes, these are our foundations, these are upbringing, this is what was reinforced to me, but do I want that narrative to continue? I'm the author of my own story. Other people are characters who may be main characters, or they may show up for a paragraph, but I'm living this experience. What do I want for myself moving forward? And so that's where it's important to really be thinking through your internal thought patterns to see, where am I on this particular spectrum? If you were to look at this kind of notion and apply it to school children, like Carol Dweck did through her research, an example of how this showed up for those students is they have fourth graders, or not fourth graders, 4-year-olds, so way earlier than that. And they gave them puzzles to do. They were easy puzzles, and they either gave them an option of continuing to do an easy puzzle or trying to do a harder one. If somebody was already at that young age in a fixed mindset, they chose an easy puzzle because they don't want to make mistakes, even at that early of an age, whereas a growth mindset 4-year-old wants a new challenge and would be confused at why you would give them the same thing to do. They also tested their brain waves and found that the kiddos were only, if they were fixed mindset, they were only interested in hearing feedback that connected to their present ability, and they tuned out information that could help them learn and improve. They had no interest in hearing the right answer if they've already gotten something wrong, because they'd already filed that experience in a category of failure. Whereas growth mindset kiddos were attentive to information that expanded their learning. In an IQ test with students who, I believe these students were in 5th grade, when they gave an intelligence test, they had a group of students that they would say, wow, that's a really good score. You must be smart at this. So they were emphasizing the end goal, whereas they had another group of students who they praised their effort and said, wow, that's a really good score. You must have worked hard for this. And as you can guess, based on the framing mechanism of fixed versus growth mindset, the students who were praised for the intelligence, the score itself, not the effort, were impacted by that. They didn't want to learn. They didn't want new challenges that they could learn from. They wanted easier assessments that would reinforce that quote unquote intelligence that they had, not to take a new challenge that could show mistakes where they would have their intelligence questioned or criticized. And for those particular students, they lost confidence as challenges became more difficult. They lost enjoyment as a result of those challenges. Whereas those students who were praised for their effort maintained confidence, their motivation and performance improved substantially. They found that the students who were praised for their intelligence, again, for their scores, even when they were asked to anonymously present their scores, 40% of those students lied and elevated their scores, whereas only 12% of the kiddos who were praised for their efforts lied. So the students who were of the fixed mindset were so ashamed in their performance that way more of them lied about their performance rather than reveal lower scores. So again, this pops up in that school environment and in that upbringing. That may be something that still permeates with us and persists with us. I have experiences in working with student leaders, for example. I advise our student government, I advise our Leadership Honor Society, and I noticed some of these patterns in some of those students and across the years in employees, specifically in thinking about criticism. Nobody loves to be told that they did something wrong, right? Like there's a natural visceral reaction we have where it's like, hey, you did something wrong. I'm not like, awesome, like I'm learning something. But for me, I think, okay, have that initial like swell of like, oh, like frustration, this sucks, but then let me come back from it and figure out what can I learn from this situation. And I always think if a student cannot receive and or an employee cannot receive criticism, how they deal with that criticism tells me whether or not I'm going to be able to help them move forward. Or are we going to hit a barrier every time there's a learning opportunity? The unfortunate thing I see now, and I don't just see it in the folks who come from living through technology, is folks are so attuned to getting information without working for it from the internet that they won't even problem solve on their own anything. They come to me, I tease them, I say, don't Google me. Like, how many pizzas should I order for an event? Well, how many students do you intend to have at the event? How many slices of pizza do you want to give to those students? There are so many facets of these experiences that I've noticed is part of our framework now versus this quest for learning. So again, that's a context piece to keep in mind, because I often think that's true. We're not going to do anything about it. You may hate the internet. Doesn't matter. It's not going to go away. So it's a tool that exists. Is it using you, or are you using it? Your phone is a tool. Are you using the tool, or is the tool using you? The algorithms are there to get you to use it. How are you using that? How are you working your brain? So that's the school environment. I'm going to take a pause before we go through your results for a test, just to kind of read through some things here. And Julie, feel free, if you're reading things through and there's anything you want to throw in there to make sure that I bring attention to it. I appreciate that you are connecting to each other. Yes, to see Amanda, like when you talk about like magically flipping a switch, it's not. I don't like all this stuff also feeds into mental health. I know somebody put that down there for in a comment. It absolutely feeds into mental health, like how we talk about ourselves and our skills and our abilities. But it's not something where it's like one day you do it, you learn this and you're done. It's a daily conversation with yourself. It's that continued internal monologue that you have with yourself. But you can train yourself to be better at it. For example, you can't see it, but there's a big poster board paper on my wall. I took the notion of a gratitude journal and 2 months ago, put it on the wall. The research backs up doing something as simple as like pointing out the joys of your day is good for your mental health. I know it, I've read it, I've told students to do it. I don't do it consistently, but I was like, I'm gonna change it for the moment, and I do it, and it feels good, and I see it, and it's another part of the day. It doesn't mean it absolves me of challenge and struggle, but it's an example of like a tip and a trick to use. But it's one element of the day. So I look at it as you learn all these elements of mental health and well-being and psychology, so that you can maintain the high highs for as long as possible and mitigate the lows as best as possible, keeping in mind reasonableness, right? Like I say, you know, if my family was in a huge van and went off the side of the mountain, I wouldn't be like, I just need to frame my perspective. Like I need to reshape this perspective. Like, what have I learned from this? But when I said like about, I put typos in things all the time. Some things I put to print, some things I email to all the employees at the college. Like I can reframe that and think, is that a question of my intelligence, or was I tired and hit a button? It's up to me to make that decision, and figure out how to move that forward. So I'll show you real quick. You have your scores, right? Like you can look according to this assessment, which was put together by Carol Dweck. This would give you a sense of where your mindset might be at based on the scores that you received. This is not like a perfect assessment tool, right? It's 10 questions, but this may start to show you a little bit where you might lean towards. But I like to think between assessment and research and literature, like you can kind of generally have a sense of where your mindset might be at for specific things, where you may feel like your personality might be and where your strengths might be. So take this with a grain of salt for sure, but this might give a sense of where your natural leanings might be. Whereas I think certain things like, you know, whether or not I'm extrovert, I get energy from people, or I'm introverted, I get energy away from others, where I think that might be more static in certain ways. Like that's just who I am, like, and I recognize that. Something like this does have a flexibility to it, right? Like where you can shape some notions of your mindset and how you choose to frame your perspectives of the world. So that's on that particular assessment. I do have like I was saying earlier, yes, like some of this research comes from aspects of school children, but your mindset can also affect relationships, which I thought was interesting to read up on when it comes to fixing growth mindset, because a lot of times we do think about it as a sense of intelligence for things like schoolwork and career performance. But if you apply those same notions to a relationship, if you're a fixed mindset individual, you may not see another person as capable of growth, that they are who they are, and you may look at their faults in the same way you might evaluate your own faults in your performance, and not look at a relationship as an opportunity for two individuals to help each other grow. So even you think about that when you're evaluating other people and you're having that internal dialogue, what are the things you're saying about that other person? Whether it's a social relationship, a romantic relationship, a professional relationship, whatever that might be, your whole notion of growth or fixed mindset might affect how you are evaluating others and in their performance. And that can be problematic when it comes to a relationship that you're trying to build in healthy ways. And even reading it, I've reflected on different connections I've had with folks over time and in and out of workplace, and how sometimes how I evaluated that situation or felt I was evaluated could have been better, or could on my behalf or the other person's behalf based on that particular mindset. So that's another place that this particular mindset notion may show up. And again, you have an opportunity to shape that and figure out if that's something you want to change and want to improve. So from here, what I'll do is I have some suggestions for ways that you could potentially utilize some of this information to reframe thought. But one of the things I want you to think about, and you can put this in the chat as well, and I'll use this time to read some of the items in the chat. Think about a recent struggle or challenge or setback you've had. And again, not like the intense, like I told you, my family, like in the van in Ohio going off of a hillside. I'm talking about a reasonable challenge or setback that you faced. And I want you to think about how you can reframe it. There was a theater that I used to do some work with in Cleveland that had a candle that they would light at the end of every show, and it said on the candle, "See the gift in the problem." And I try to keep that in mind sometimes when I go through challenge, like what is my takeaway? How can I reframe that challenge or struggle that I've had? So I'd like you to do that now. And like I said, you're more than welcome to share it in the chat if you're comfortable doing that. And I'll kind of read through some of these comments.
Dan, you are right on the mark with everything.
Perfect. Sometimes I don't know. It's that caffeine mojo.
I know.
And this is why I appreciate, like, as I'm reading, I'll throw some stuff out there as you all are typing, is like, that's the reason I put health, when you all talk about mental health, the reason I put health as a pillar is because, for example, if I've gotten 3 hours of sleep and I come to the office, it doesn't matter that I may operate from a growth mindset lens. Somebody gives me criticism and I'm exhausted. Do you think I'm going to operate from a growth mindset? Probably not. Probably not, because I'm not at a good place to receive that information. So that's an example where that can potentially show up as part of this notion. I also like a quote. I know there's items on feedback in there. Amanda, I saw that. I used to keep a quote up on my bulletin board at work that said, "Most of us would rather be ruined by praise than strengthened by criticism." And that was a reminder to me, for example, of that element of, like, you have to be able to take feedback. As an example, I did a presentation at a state student leadership conference and got 60 evaluations that were great. And there was one that was not great. And guess where I invested most of my time in that initial read? It was that one student's feedback. And I was like, why are 60 other students happy and this one student is not satisfied? And then I had to take a step back and go, okay, this is this student's authentic assessment of her experience. Can I take elements of her feedback and apply it to my performance so that next time I make it better for a student who may want something different without watering it down for these others? But I had to get through that initial visceral reaction. But it's a learning thing. And again, it's not I didn't do it one time and it's done, right? Like, criticism is always going to be there and feedback's always going to be there in different ways. But I think I would like to think I get better at it every single time that I go through that. So other things to keep in mind with kind of adjusting some of these things, if this is something that you would like to do. And we all, I like how I say this, it's fitting to this, we all have an ability to get better at these concepts, which tells you probably which mindset I tend to lead towards, is I do think we all have possibilities of getting better. I do think there's a lot of framing that we need to consider in our internal dialogue. For example, when you think about You think about, for example, an Olympic athlete. We look at like somebody in any one of those sports and we're like, oh my gosh, like I could never do that. That person, say it's a figure skater. It's not like that person put on skates that day and was like, I'm going to be a figure skater, and like zoomed around and did an incredible routine. There's so many days and hours in that, but we lose sight of that when we look at what somebody is able to accomplish. The first time I started designing things like posters and things, I didn't know how to operate things and move things around the computer. I do now, but I didn't know at the time. I started doing yoga for the first time ever. The first time I tried to do one pose, like it kept falling over, and I was like, gosh, I don't know that I'll ever be able to do this. It's like kind of where my mind starts to go, but I'm like, be patient. And then one day I was going to show somebody that same move to say like, this is this move I can't do, and I did it. But if I'd continued to operate from the standpoint of like, this is something I'll never do, my body never would have gotten to that particular point. But you don't see that in the beginning of the process. And context-wise, it's so important to think about our current framework, because it affects that patience with our performance. Some of you may remember when we used to order things online. I shouldn't say online. When we used to order things through the mail, 6 to 8 weeks for delivery. That requires patience. Now I want something, I know Amazon's going to have it on my doorstep maybe tomorrow. I don't have to be patient anymore. I don't have to be patient with things showing up on my door, but I should be patient with my own growth and development and my connection to other people and my patience with other people in their development. But if we're operating from a context that is about quick, I get it, I get results, we can start to put that stuff back on ourselves, and we have to be careful with that. Let's see, the quote, I know, Amanda, you were asking the quote, it was something along the lines of, most of us would rather be ruined by praise than strengthened by criticism. So in the notion of the example with the kiddos in school, those examples talked about how praising the end result had a negative impact. Like, we certainly want to celebrate the end result, but we should celebrate the process, the learning process, the experience of getting to the end result, not just the end result itself. Or we're not learning through that particular process, especially if you're also giving that as external praise to somebody else and you're recognizing the work that they've done. Recognize the effort that's been put into that process, not just that particular end result. I have had students who have succeeded in a challenge at leadership retreats. You have to get from point A to point B, crossing a molten river. I've had students who have gotten to the other side of the river that I would say failed because they damaged relationships in the process. Whereas other groups didn't cross the river, and I would say they succeeded because they maintained group cohesion and learned from the experience. Simply getting to an end result does not mean success in my book. Learn from your triggers. Make sure that you pay attention to how you respond to different situations. So if you notice that you're getting angry, defensive, or ashamed with criticism, notice that, note it, figure out how to reframe it. If you're noticing that you are jealous and demotivated when you see somebody else who's wildly successful in different ways, notice that, be mindful of that. In particular, I have noted a lot of my students over the years of working at the community colleges do what I call comparative thinking. Be like, my friend, like, what has been out of school for whatever many years, and I know people who, okay, like, that's a beauty of a community college, is people are coming back at all phases of their lives. If I compare every facet of my life to everybody else, like, by nature, then I am a failure. So be mindful of the comparative thinking. Do you use what other people are doing to inspire and motivate, or do you use it to criticize yourself and demotivate yourself? When you face setbacks, how are you moving through that? Are you seeing the lessons in that, or are you letting it discourage you? If you're experiencing a challenge or a struggle, are you able to push past anxiety, and self-doubt. I do think in all of these, it's important to observe those patterns, those thought patterns, to reflect on those experiences, to control your sense of narrative for yourself in your life, to find a joy in the process and the learning, and to also find your comforts in what I call external brain, which could be therapy for some folks, or for others, you do have good support networks at your disposal. I would like to think so, whether that's one person or 5 people. You need people to process life situations with, who you can trust to be authentic with, to talk through some of those thought patterns that you may have. So don't, I think overall, you don't want to get caught up in sticking in a similar thought pattern if it's not serving you well. If it's serving you well, great. If you're feeling successful, if you're feeling fulfilled, if you are feeling happy, you have healthy experiences across the board, then keep doing what you're doing, and pay attention to that. But if you want something to change, then think about what it is you want to change, and how to go about doing that. Don't go overboard and try to like change your entire life in one day. That's not how it works. But like, every step that you take today is a step you didn't take yesterday. Like, a baby step is still a step. So that's my soapbox. I would like to hear from you all on any observations that you may have on how this shows up for you in your life, as well as any questions you might have. And you're welcome to unmute if you would like to say things through the mic. You're welcome to keep typing in the chat, which works for some other folks. I do appreciate you all sharing those thoughts with each other in the chat, especially as I know, like, this has not been the easiest year of doing this in this way. Like, I'm a people person. I love being around other people. So I'm excited to do some of these things back in person again. So I appreciate the participation there.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Dan.
Sure. Yeah.
Like I said in the chat, I'm 29 years old and I lived probably 26 years of my life in a pretty fixed mindset. One, kind of just dealing with past experiences and trying to get through that on my own and not really seeking for help, you know. And then just not really having the parental guidance when I was younger to kind of figure out how to have a growth mindset. Just a lack of guidance really set me up for a fixed mindset. But as I gotten older, I had a kid, and my younger brother went through some issues, I started to turn into a growth mindset pretty fast. And this last year with the pandemic, it's just been a huge change for me as therapy started. And I can't see myself. My score was close to 30, and 5 years ago it'd probably be around 10 maybe. So there's been some huge change. There's always positives with negatives.
Yeah. Well, and I often think, number one, we don't learn how to like be successful humans. We learn fact. We, like, our parents teach us like certain ways of the world, and maybe certain ways to like stay away from danger. Like, the stove is hot, like the knife is sharp, like those kind of things. We don't learn how to have healthy mindsets. We don't learn to have productive, healthy relationships. So these are things that sometimes it feels like we need to learn over time. And sometimes I do think that learning, if we really want to be successful, is unlearning what we learned, depending on what our circumstances were. Because
Totally.
some folks have situations similar where it was not a great situation, but now it's like, okay, like, this is your life. Like, if you don't like that, how do you move through in a healthy way? And I appreciate you bringing up therapy. I have a lot of friends who utilize therapy. I call it gym of the mind. Like,
Yeah.
This has a lot of control over everything.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about therapy for years, and I mean, I probably should have gone to, or I was thinking about it when I was about 22, and I barely just started going last year. So it's been a very long process to open up and be vulnerable, but just me being vulnerable to myself and acknowledging all the fixed mindset ways I had before has really helped me grow into a different mindset. And everybody around me, my fiance, brother, sister, mom, dad, have all kind of absorbed some of it as well and kind of changed their ways in a small manner.
Awesome. Send out those ripples.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So what I think is most significant about the growth mindset is how it's like it applies to basically every aspect of our lives, like you said, right? Like it's helped me with school, it's helped me take feedback at work, and it's helped me, even in my friendships and my relationship with my husband, because if he tells me something that I did that bothered him, if I'm not hearing that, then I can't change for us to have a better relationship. But if I can take that feedback and, like you said, it sucks and it doesn't feel good to hear that, like, I hurt his feelings or that I bothered him or something. But if I can hear that, then I can change, what led to that. And then we both grow from that. So it's so significant.
Yeah, absolutely. And starting to peel back, because I know since you've mentioned relationships, I know Sarah put that in there, just different dynamics of really trying to figure out what's going on in this situation. Like what is a part of like, we're just tired, or what is inherently part of a person. And like I often find between two people, when there's tension, it's because there's a difference in expectation. This person is not performing to what I would want them to, or not treating me the way I'd want to be treated. Can I have a conversation to change their behavior? Can I evaluate the situation and lower my expectations? Or is it like big enough where this is just not a healthy situation? So in a dynamic like that, there is the give and take in the pool, and being able to advocate for what you need, and to also understand what another person needs. But if you don't operate through a certain lens, like you may not see that potential of growing as part of that dynamic. According to my computer, we have 1 minute left, which is not really a lot of time to dive deeper into anything else right now. But I just want to say I appreciate you all again being here to soak up some of this information. Keep learning all these different things. Just because I know some of this information doesn't make me a pro, and doesn't mean I don't screw up from time to time. But the whole notion of this is, when I screw up, what am I going to do with it? Do I want to change? Do I want to be better? Do I believe that I can be better? And I do. I think I can be better today than I was yesterday, but not every day is going to be a knock out of the park. And I'm okay with that. But if I'm not okay with a certain day, then I need to think about how to improve it for the next one. So keep soaking it up.
Thank you so much, Dan.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you being here. That was a wonderful hour out of my day that I know made it better. And I want to encourage all of you to definitely reach out to Alyssa if there are resources that you need as you begin to think about summer semester and fall semester courses, and or any other resources that you might need. She is here for you to help support you, and so am I. And I know that Dan would be happy to get you involved in some student life activities at any way, shape, or form. I don't know if you want to give any pitch for anything coming up, Dan, that's happening in the next week or so as we move into spring that you'd love to have folks be involved in.
Yeah, I would say just be mindful. Do you all get the Monday morning to do? Okay, perfect. Because it's currently one of the things I do as of the start of the fall semester of last year. So I'd say I know that sometimes there's a lot in there. Just read through it, because otherwise you may miss out on some opportunities. Like, this is your experience as a student. It's a unique experience. There's nothing like being part of an educational environment, the energy that's there. So check it out. And if there are things of interest, definitely tap into them. Or if there's things, you're not seeing certain things and you would like to see them, let me know and share those ideas.
Yeah, I think I stumbled across the survey for the mascot name in the Monday
Oh,
news,
perfect.
maybe.
Okay.
And I totally did the survey and received a shirt, and I couldn't be more appreciative. It's an
Awesome.
awesome shirt, and it fits perfect.
Okay, very good. Thank you for doing that. I was actually impressed with how many students filled out that survey.
Yeah.
I think it was like 530 students. Did not expect that. Did not.
Yeah.
So thank
And
you.
now we have an awesome name, an awesome mascot. So that's awesome.
I'm pumped.
Yeah, I just want to take a quick second and plug it. If anybody doesn't check out that Monday newsletter, it's actually pretty cool. And I've gotten a lot of like, especially, you know, for upcoming deadlines of like scholarships or, you know, registrations opening up, like it's super helpful. So definitely check it out.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you everyone for taking time out of your day. Thank you, Dan, for sharing your insights with us. It's always wonderful. And I hope that all of you get to enjoy the sunshine for the next few days. Knock on wood, we will have a sunshine into the weekend and no snow. And then probably Monday morning, there'll be snow, right? But enjoy the rest of your week and your weekend. And thank you for all you do. And good luck moving those mountains. You guys take care. And have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, guys.
And thanks,
Bye.
Julie.
Thank you.